The screaming alarm cut through the silence of Houston Control like a knife through flesh. Commander Jake Thompson's coffee mug shattered against the floor as he bolted upright, his 30 years of military training kicking in before his brain fully processed what was happening. The digital clock glowed 3:47 a.m., and the massive wall display was painting the room in pulsing red light. "What the hell is that?" Jake barked, his voice cutting through the chaos as technicians scrambled to their stations. But deep down, he already knew this wasn't a drill. The pattern on the screen was unlike anything Earth's deep space monitoring systems had ever detected, mathematical sequences that repeated with desperate precision, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez, the brightest xenolinguist in the Space Force, stood frozen at her console. Her hands trembled as she ran the pattern through every decryption algorithm humanity possessed. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the klaxon, "this isn't random cosmic noise. Someone's trying to talk to us." Jake felt his blood turn to ice. First contact protocols demanded careful analysis, diplomatic committees, months of preparation. But the urgency in that signal made his combat instincts scream warnings. How long did he code it? "I'm running it through the Universal Mathematics Framework now," Amy replied, her fingers flying across holographic interfaces. "If they're using prime numbers and basic physics like we theorized, ... got it." The translated message appeared on screen, and Jake's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ground together. "Help us. They harvest our children. We have days left." The control room fell silent, except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment. 23 people stared at those words, and Jake could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. Humanity's first message from the stars wasn't a greeting, it was a death scream. Source location, Jake demanded, his military mind already calculating response times and fuel requirements. 43 light years, sir. The Proxima Centauri B system. Amy's voice cracked. "They're dying out there, and we're the only ones who can hear them. Think about that for a moment. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, an entire species was facing extinction. And their final act was to reach across the void, hoping someone, anyone, would care enough to help. How do you ignore a cry like that?" Jake grabbed the secure line to Washington. 3 rings. "Mr. President, we have a situation that requires immediate authorization." 20 minutes later, President Martinez's voice crackled through the encrypted channel with just 4 words. "Do whatever it takes." The USS Vengeance had been humanity's greatest achievement, a warship designed for conflicts that might never come. Powered by fusion drives that could fold space itself, that would become Earth's sword of justice, carried by the finest warriors the planet could produce. Jake handpicked his crew of 25 from files marked with blood and honor. Sergeant Maria Santos, who'd held a Marine outpost against impossible odds on Mars. Lieutenant Robert Hayes, a pilot who could thread a needle while pulling 12 Gs. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a trauma surgeon who'd saved more lives than some small countries had citizens. Each name represented the pinnacle of human capability, forged in Earth's crucible of competition and conflict. "Listen up, Jake," addressed his assembled crew in the Vengeance's launch bay, his voice echoing off titanium walls. The ship hummed around them like a caged predator eager for release. "We don't know what we're flying into. Could be a trap, could be a test, could be exactly what it appears to be, innocent people dying while monsters feast on their children." He paused, studying each face. These weren't just soldiers. They were humanity's ambassadors to a universe that apparently contained horrors beyond imagination. "But here's what I know for certain. Someone screamed for help across 43 light years of empty space, and we're the only ones who heard them. That makes this our responsibility." The ship's artificial gravity kicked in as they lifted off, pressing everyone back into their acceleration couches. Through reinforced viewports, Earth dwindled from a world to a continent, to a marble, to a pale blue dot. Jake watched his home planet disappear and wondered if they'd ever see it again. You know what's funny about space travel? Movies make it look peaceful, with gentle music and beautiful views. The reality is 6 weeks of recycled air, processed food, and the constant awareness that you're hurtling through an environment that wants to kill you in 1,000 different ways. But Jake's crew used that time to prepare, running combat simulations and studying every scrap of data about the signal's origin. The countdown timer on the bridge showed 3 minutes to emergence when sensors detected massive energy signatures. At their destination, Jake felt his stomach drop. They weren't arriving at a peaceful first contact scenario. They were dropping into the middle of a war. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "Whatever's out there, we're about to meet it face to face." The Vengeance dropped out of hyperspace, and Jake's worst fears materialized. On the tactical display, alien ships, dozens of them, swarmed around a dying world like vultures around a carcass. But these weren't scavengers. They were the predators that had answered Earth's first cosmic neighbors with steel and fire. The real question wasn't whether humanity could win this fight. The question was whether any of the people they'd come to save would still be alive by the time the shooting stopped. The Harvester fleet stretched across the star system like a disease made manifest in metal and flesh. 57 massive ships hung in the void, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with an obscene rhythm that suggested something alive yet utterly wrong. Captain Mike Chen pressed his crystalline palm against the viewport of his dying command vessel, watching his civilization burn 40,000 kilometers below. "Commander," his aide Tom whispered, all 4 of his translucent arms shaking. "With terror, they've breached the northern districts. The nurseries." His voice broke completely. Mike's skin flickered from blue to deep purple, the Viridian equivalent of absolute despair. His people had evolved on a peaceful world where the greatest predator was no larger than a house cat. They'd spent millennia perfecting art, philosophy, and mathematics. War was a concept they'd only encountered in ancient historical records from other species. Until today, the Harvester ships moved with mechanical precision that spoke of practice-terrible, extensive practice. Their hulls weren't just metal. They were living tissue merged with advanced technology, creating vessels that could adapt, heal, and most horrifically feed. Bioextractors, the size of city blocks, descended from their bellies like obscene umbilical cords, connecting to population centers below. Have you ever watched a spider drain a fly? The process was disturbingly similar, except the flies were sentient beings with families, dreams, and children who would never grow up. "Sir, the defense platforms are reporting total system failure," came another voice from across the bridge. "They're not just destroying our weapons, they're absorbing them, okay? Converting our own technology against us." Mike closed his eyes, trying to block out the screams echoing through the planetary communication network. The Harvesters weren't just killing, they were harvesting in the most literal sense. Every Viridian life became fuel for their war machine. Every piece of technology was converted to serve their conquest. It was industrialized extinction, refined across 1,000 worlds into perfect efficiency. War Prince Drac stood on the command deck of his flagship Fleshrender, his 6 eyes surveying the feast spread before him. His species had crawled from the toxic swamps of a dying world, and their evolution had been guided by one simple principle: consume or be consumed. They'd chosen consumption. "Status report," Drac commanded, his voice a wet rasp that seemed to emerge from multiple throats. Simultaneously, "Harvest proceeding on schedule, War Prince," his tactical coordinator replied, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Population extraction at 87% efficiency. Biomass conversion rates exceed projections by 12%. Secondary arms gestured approval while his primary limbs worked the tactical display. Each Viridian life showed as a small light being extinguished, feeding the great machine of his empire. "Excellent," marked this system for industrial conversion. "The crystalline substrate will make excellent hull plating for the next conquest fleet." You want to know the truly terrifying part? This wasn't personal for them. The Harvesters felt no hatred, no anger, no sadistic pleasure. To them, this was simply Tuesday. Another species, another harvest, another step toward their ultimate goal of consuming every living thing in the galaxy. War Prince, a communications officer, interrupted. We're detecting residual quantum signatures from the outer system. The prey species may have sent a distress call before we eliminated their deep space arrays. Drax's laugh sounded like grinding metal. Let them scream into the void. We've harvested 47 civilizations, and no one has ever answered their calls for help. The universe is cold and empty, and we are its apex predators. Below on Viridian Prime, the last free city was dying. Crystal spires that had stood for millennia cracked and fell as bio-extractors drained not just the population, but the very life force from the planet itself. In the emergency shelters, Viridian families huddled together, their natural luminescence dimming with fear and despair. Elder Zara held her grandchildren close, their small forms trembling against her chest. Through the reinforced walls, she could hear the terrible sound of the extraction process, a low humming that seemed to pull at something fundamental in every living cell. "Grandmother," little Kex whispered, "will the light beings come to save us?" The light beings were mythology, stories from the old texts about legendary heroes who traveled between stars. Zara had told those stories to comfort children, never believing them herself. "Perhaps, little one," she lied, because what else could you tell a child facing oblivion? But then something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to ripple and tear, reality bending like fabric under incredible stress. Energy readings spiked across every sensor in the system as something forced its way through the dimensional barrier. With the subtlety of a sledgehammer through glass, the USS Vengeance materialized in the middle of the Harvester formation like Death's own chariot, its angular hull scarred by passage through folded space. Warning lights bathed its bridge in crimson as tactical displays lit up with target acquisitions. Commander Jake Thompson stood at the center of it all, his weathered face a mask of controlled fury as he took in the scene below. 47 years. Old veteran of 3 colonial wars, father of 2 daughters back on Earth. Right now, watching alien children die while monsters fed. He looked like something carved from granite and tempered in hellfire. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez bent over her. Sensor station, her face pale with horror. "Sir, the energy readings, they're not just killing them. They're converting biological matter into some kind of fuel source. The entire population." She couldn't finish the sentence. Jake's hands clenched into fists behind his back. In his earpiece, he could hear the tactical analysis streaming in estimated civilian casualties. Projected completion time for the harvest, probability assessments for intervention success. Numbers and statistics that represented millions of lives hanging in the balance. "Sir," Sergeant Santos called from the weapons station, "I'm reading 57 hostile contacts. They've got us surrounded and outgunned by at least 20 to 1. Jake smiled then, and it was the most terrifying expression his crew had ever seen. Cold, predatory, and absolutely certain. "Not anymore," he said quietly, his voice carrying the promise of violence that would make gods weep. The harvesters were about to learn why Earth was classified as a death world, and why humans were the apex predators of their own particular corner of hell. War Prince Drax's voice crackled across the void with the confidence of a predator who had never met his equal. "Unknown vessel withdraw immediately or face annihilation. We are 57 ships. You are 1. Your species will make excellent biomass for our next conquest." On the bridge of the USS Vengeance, Commander Jake Thompson listened to the transmission with the patience of a man who had stared death in the face. So many times they'd become drinking buddies. His crew watched him, waiting for orders, their hands steady on weapons that could crack planets. The tactical display showed impossible odds: 57 alien ships against 1 human vessel. Jake smiled then, and it was the smile of a great white shark spotting a seal colony. "Message received. Ugly. Here's ours." The Vengeance opened fire with the fury of Earth itself. The first railgun salvo moved at 17% the speed of light, each tungsten penetrator carrying the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. The lead harvester dreadnought, a biomechanical monstrosity the size of Manhattan, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, pulsing with organic malevolence. The next, It was a expanding sphere of superheated plasma and screaming metal. 4,000. Harvester crew members died in that first second, vaporized so quickly their final thoughts never had time to form. A shockwave rippled through space, and suddenly the universe's apex predators realized they might have made a terrible mistake. Impossible. Or Prince Drax shrieked from his command throne, his 6 eyes locked on displays. Showing the impossible, no single ship carries such firepower. But the humans were just getting started. Lieutenant Lefreda Amy Rodriguez coordinated target acquisition with the cold precision of a surgeon removing cancer. Target locked harvester cruiser, bearing 27 Mark IV, firing solution calculated. Fire, Jake ordered, his voice steady as bedrock. The second salvo punched through 2 more harvester vessels simultaneously, the railgun rounds traveling in perfect formation like metallic angels of death. Bioarmor that had withstood asteroid impacts, crumpled like tissue paper, organic hulls that could self-repair from devastating damage. Simply disintegrated under the focused wrath of human engineering. You want to know what separates humans from other species? We don't just fight wars, we perfect them. Every conflict teaches us new ways to kill more efficiently, and we've been practicing for 10,000 years. Hey, boarding teams, you are clear for insertion, Jake announced over the ship's comm system. Remember, they harvest children. Show them what Earth thinks about that. Sergeant Maria Santos had volunteered for this mission the moment she heard children were involved. At 34, she'd served in the Martian colonial wars, the asteroid belt conflicts, and 3 separate peacekeeping missions that had been anything but peaceful. She'd earned 17 commendations for valor and carried scars from battles across the solar system. Right now, floating in the vacuum between ships with her assault rifle locked and loaded, she was exactly where she belonged. Breaching charges. Set, reported Corporal David Miller through the tactical net. His heavy plasma cannon hummed with barely contained energy, eager to introduce alien butchers to American-made justice. Ready to show these freaks what happens when you mess with kids? The charges detonated with surgical precision, opening the harvester hole like a can opener. Maria led her 12-person team through the breach, their powered armor sealing automatically against the hostile environment. What they found inside made her jaw clench with barely controlled rage. The harvester ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a floating abattoir. Organic chambers pulsed with harvested biomass, processing the life essence of an entire species into fuel for their war machine. Worst of all were the preservation tanks, holding Viridian children in suspended animation, kept alive for the freshness of their life force. Jesus Christ, whispered Private Johnson, his voice tight with horror and fury. They're farming them. Maria's response was immediate and decisive. Her plasma rifle carved through the first group of harvester warriors like a hot knife through butter. These weren't soldiers in any recognizable sense. They were industrial butchers, efficient at slaughter, but unprepared for actual combat against a species that had refined warfare into a science. These aren't soldiers, Maria snarled into her cum, stepping over alien corpses that leaked fluorescent ichor across the deck plates. They're butchers. They've never faced real resistance. Behind her, Corporal Miller's heavy cannon turned, a corridor intersection, into an abstract art piece painted in alien blood. The harvesters had superior numbers and home field advantage. But they'd made one critical error in judgment. They'd attacked children in front of humans.
Oh.
Then let's teach them what real killers look like. Jake's voice crackled through the cum system, filled with the cold promise of absolute retribution. The USS Vengeance moved through the enemy fleet like death given form and function. Every torpedo launched was a precisely calculated kill shot. Every energy beam carved through alien armor with the surgical precision of a master butcher. The ship's AI had been programmed with the tactical knowledge of every human conflict since Thermopylae, and it was applying those lessons with devastating efficiency. What kind of monsters are these humans? Drax's tactical coordinator wailed as another squadron of harvester ships died in brilliant explosions. Their vessel moves like a living thing. Weapons strike with impossible accuracy. Was both simpler and more terrifying than they could comprehend. Humans weren't just another species. They were the product of 4 billion years of evolution on a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. They'd survived ice ages, supervolcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and their own violent nature. War wasn't something they did, was something they were. "Sir," reported the communications officer, his multiple appendages trembling with fear. "3 more severely damaged. 23 more severely damaged. At this rate, the entire fleet will be eliminated within the hour." War Prince Drax stared at the tactical display, watching decades of careful conquest planning disappear in bursts of human fury. His species had ruled the galaxy for 3 millennia, harvesting entire civilizations without ever facing serious resistance. How could one ship from an unknown species be systematically destroying his entire fleet, the kind Jake Thompson's voice cut through their communications with the authority of judgment itself, that "Don't let children die on our watch." And in that moment, as another Harvester dreadnought exploded like a dying star, War Prince Drax realized his empire had just encountered something it had never faced before. Species more predatory than themselves. Fighting for something more powerful than conquest. They were fighting for justice, and they were very, very good at it. The silence that followed the battle was deafening, where 57 Harvester ships had once darkened the void like a plague of locusts. Now only twisted metal and cooling plasma remained. 30 enemy vessels had been reduced to scrap metal and memories, their biomechanical hulls leaking atmosphere and alien blood into the vacuum of space. War Prince Drax's flagship flesh render limped through the debris field like a wounded animal. Its organic hull punctured in 17 places. Green ichor leaked from wounds that should have been fatal, kept alive only by the ship's parasitic repair systems. On his command bridge, Drax stared at tactical displays, showing the impossible his invincible fleet scattered. Broken, running like prey animals from a single human vessel. "Retreat coordinates locked in," his navigation officer reported, his voice barely a whisper. "Jumping to hyperspace in 30 seconds. Drax's 6 eyes burned with hatred and something he'd never experienced before, genuine fear. "Send word to the High Command. Tell them we've encountered a species that fights like demons. They must be warned." The surviving Harvester ships vanished into hyperspace, carrying with them the first defeat their empire had suffered in 3,000 years. But they also carried something else, the terrifying knowledge that humanity had entered the galactic stage. And they were nothing like the peaceful prey species the Harvesters had grown accustomed to consuming. On the bridge of the USS Vengeance, Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez monitored the retreat with professional satisfaction. Her hands still trembled with combat adrenaline as she tracked the enemy signatures. "Sir, 27 Harvester vessels have successfully jumped to hyperspace. We're detecting massive engine failures on the remainder. They won't be going anywhere." Soon, Jake Thompson stood at the tactical display, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of victory markers. But there was no celebration in his expression, only grim determination. "Lock onto their engine signatures before they fade. I want to know where those bastards came from." "Already on it, Commander?" Amy replied, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. Engine resonance patterns suggest their origin point is approximately 15 light-years spinward. "I'm detecting industrial-scale infrastructure. This might be their home system." Jake's smile was cold as winter on Mars. "Good, because this isn't over. Not by a long shot. You know what's interesting about predators? They don't just hunt for food, they hunt to eliminate threats to their territory. And as far as humanity was concerned, the entire galaxy had just become their territory." Below on Viridian Prime, the planet's surface told a story of narrow survival. Crystalline cities lay in ruins, their geometric beauty scarred by bioextraction equipment. But in the spaces between destruction, something miraculous was happening. Life was returning. Lieutenant Robert Hayes moved through the refugee camps with the careful precision of a man who understood that first impressions mattered. His combat armor was scarred from boarding actions and painted with alien blood, but his movements were gentle as he distributed medical supplies to Viridian survivors. A small Viridian child, no more than 6 years old in human terms, sat beside the ruins of what had once been a nursery. Her crystalline skin flickered between blue and purple, the colors of fear and confusion. When Robert approached, she flinched away, her large eyes reflecting the terror of recent trauma. "Easy, little one," Robert whispered, activating his translation device. The words emerged in harmonic tones that matched Viridian's speech patterns. "The monsters are gone. You're safe now." The child studied this strange alien creature with its bipedal form and forward-facing predator eyes.
Ow.
But there was something. In his posture, some quality in his voice that spoke of protection rather than threat. "You... you came for us?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Robert knelt beside her, his massive frame somehow managing to appear non-threatening. "That's what humans do," he said simply. "You protect those who can't protect themselves." It was such a simple statement, but it carried the weight of species philosophy. Humans had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain not just through violence, but through cooperation. They protected their young, their weak, their allies. Now that protective instinct had expanded to include an entire galaxy. Captain Mike Chen approached the human landing site with a mixture of awe and confusion. His crystalline features still flickered with the aftershocks of trauma, but his arms gestured in the Viridian equivalent of formal greeting. As the senior surviving military officer of his species, he felt obligated to understand these strange saviors who had appeared from nowhere. Jake Thompson stood beside the Vengeance's shuttlecraft, studying damage reports on a tactical tablet. His ship had taken minimal damage, but every human life was precious this far from home. When he saw the alien officer approaching, he set aside his reports and offered a respectful nod. "Commander Thompson," Mike said through his translator, "I must ask you something that haunts my thoughts. Why? Why risk everything for strangers? Your ship, your crew, your lives, you've gambled it all for people you'd never met." Jake looked out across the refugee camps, where human medics worked alongside Viridian healers to tend the wounded. "Because someone had to answer your call," he said quietly. "And because in our language, we have a word, genocide. We've seen what it does to civilizations, to families, to children. We swore never to let it happen again to anyone." The weight of history hung in those words. Humanity's own dark chapters, the lessons learned in blood and tears, had forged them into something unique in the galaxy apex predators with a conscience. Mike's skin shifted to gold, the Viridian color of deep respect. "Your species carries great pain, doesn't it? That's why you fight so fiercely for others." Before Jake could respond, the tactical display on his tablet erupted with new contacts. Amy's voice crackled through his comm unit with barely controlled. "Urgency, Commander, we've got incoming. 50 new harvester signatures just dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. They're forming attack formations." Jake's expression shifted from contemplative to predatory in an instant. The smile that spread across his face was the same, one his ancestors had worn while hunting, saber-toothed, tigers confident, deadly, and absolutely without mercy. "Like we're not done teaching lessons," he said, his voice carrying the promise of violence that would echo across the stars. The harvesters had just made their second mistake. The first was attacking innocent children. Second was coming back for more. As the enemy fleet accelerated toward Viridian Prime, humanity was about to demonstrate why Earth was considered a death world and why its apex predators had evolved. Not just to survive, but to dominate everything that threatened their pack. The real hunt was about to begin. The second harvester fleet dropped out of hyperspace with the confidence of apex predators returning to finish a meal. Admiral Vex had commanded the Imperial Reserve Fleet for 47 years, overseeing the systematic extinction of 12 species. His biomechanical flagship Death's Garden was a kilometer-long nightmare of organic technology and weapons designed to crack planets. Behind him came 49 more vessels, each one a floating monument to the Empire's 3,000-year reign of terror. Sensors detect significant debris in the target zone, his tactical coordinator reported, mandibles clicking with anticipation. War Prince Drax's fleet appears to have completed the harvest ahead of schedule. Admiral Vex's compound eyes studied the tactical display with satisfaction. "Excellent. We'll collect the processed biomass and move to the next target system. The High Command wants the Outer Rim cleared by the end of the cycle. But as his fleet moved deeper into the system, something felt wrong. The debris patterns didn't match standard harvest completion. There was too much twisted metal, too many energy signatures that suggested violent destruction rather than systematic processing. Admiral, his communications officer's voice, carried an edge of confusion. Not detecting any of our harvest ships, the biomass collection vessels, the processing platforms, they're all gone. That's when the USS Vengeance revealed itself. Human warship had been waiting in the shadow of Viridian Prime's largest moon, stealth systems making it invisible to harvester sensors. But Jake Thompson wasn't interested in hiding anymore. His ship emerged from concealment like Death's own messenger. Its hull scarred from the previous battle, but its weapons fully charged and hungry for more alien blood. Unknown vessel, Admiral. Vex broadcast, his voice dripping with the arrogance of someone who had never faced defeat. You will surrender immediately or face the full might of the Harvester Imperial fleet. We are 50 ships. You are one. Jake Thompson's response came, not in words, but in action. The Vengeance opened fire with every weapon system it possessed, turning the void into a light show of destruction that would have been beautiful if it weren't so absolutely lethal. The first railgun salvo caught 3 Harvester cruisers in perfect formation, the tungsten penetrators moving at 17% light speed. The alien ships simply evaporated, their bioarmor unable to comprehend kinetic energy delivered with such focused precision. In the space of 5 seconds, 15,000 Harvester crew members ceased to exist. Impossible, Admiral Vex shrieked. His 6 eyes locked on displays showing his fleet taking casualties at an unprecedented rate. No single vessel can generate such firepower. But the humans had learned something during their first engagement. They'd captured Harvester technology, reverse-engineered their weapons systems, and integrated alien bioweapons with human targeting systems. The result was a hybrid arsenal that combined the best of both technologies with the relentless efficiency that made humans the apex predators of their homeworld. You want to know what makes humans different from every other species in the galaxy? They don't just adapt to their enemies, they become better versions of their enemies. Then they use that knowledge to systematically destroy everything that threatens their pack. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez coordinated the weapons systems with surgical precision, her fingers dancing across controls that managed both human and alien technology. Target lock acquired on their flagship. Firing solution calculated for maximum psychological impact. Fire, Jake ordered, his voice carrying the cold authority of absolute judgment. The hybrid torpedo that struck Admiral Vex's flagship wasn't just a weapon, it was a statement. Human engineering wrapped around Harvester biotechnology, creating a projectile that could think, adapt, and penetrate any defense. When it struck Death's Garden, the explosion tore through the ship's organic hull like acid through flesh. Admiral Vex found himself thrown against his command throne as his ship shuddered under impacts that should have been impossible. Emergency lights bathed his bridge in hellish red as damage reports flooded in from every section. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 23, bioarmor failing, main weapons offline. The reports came in a cascade of panic as his crew realized they were facing something they'd never encountered before, species more predatory than themselves. Retreat, Vex ordered, his voice cracking with the first fear he'd felt in decades. All ships, emergency jumped to hyperspace. Jake Thompson had other plans. This is Commander Thompson of Earth. His voice cut through the Harvester communication channels with the authority of divine wrath. Hear this message, Harvesters. You've harvested your last world. You've terrorized your last species. You've murdered your last child. Humanity is coming for you, and we will not stop until every one of your ships is burning wreckage floating in the void. The battle that followed lasted 6 hours and became the stuff of legend. Human tactical doctrine refined through 10,000. Years of warfare met alien technology in a dance of destruction that redefined the concept of space combat. Every torpedo found its mark. Every energy beam carved through alien formations with mathematical precision. Every boarding action ended with Harvester crew learning why Earth was classified as a death world. When the shooting finally stopped, 42 Harvester ships had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated gas and twisted metal. The survivors fled into hyperspace, carrying with them the terrifying news that the galaxy's apex predators had been dethroned by something even more dangerous. On Viridian Prime, the celebration lasted for days. Human engineers worked alongside Viridian architects to rebuild crystalline cities. Marine medics treated alien wounded with the same care they'd show their own species. And in the ruins of the old world, something beautiful was happening. Children of two species played together, their laughter echoing across landscapes that had recently known only death. Captain Mike Chen found Jake Thompson standing beside a reconstruction site, watching human and Viridian children chase each other through the rubble with the universal joy that transcends species barriers. "What happens now?" Mike asked, his crystalline features reflecting the hope that had returned to his world. Jake watched a human girl teaching a Viridian boy how to throw a baseball, both of them giggling as the ball sailed wide of its target. "Now we make sure this never happens again," he said quietly. "The galaxy has new guardians." Across the stars, other species began broadcasting the same desperate plea that had first brought humanity running. The Crystalline Collective of Andromeda, the hive mind of Sector 7, the nomadic fleets of the Outer Rim, all of them crying out for help against the Harvester scourge that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. And in the depths of space, more human warships began to answer those calls. The USS Retribution, the USS Justice, the USS Never Again. Each one crewed by humans who understood that with great power came great responsibility, and that sometimes the only way to protect innocence was through overwhelming, focused violence. The Harvester Empire suddenly found itself facing something it never encountered in 3,000 years of conquest resistance. Not just resistance, but systematic extermination by a species that had turned warfare into both science and art. Earth's Deathworlders had taken their place on the galactic stage, not as conquerors seeking dominion, but as guardians protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. They had become the universe's most terrifying protectors, and they were very, very good at their job. The age of harvest was over. The age of humanity had begun. The end.